Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great privilege to speak to such a distinguished audience. Special greetings to my friend Zlatko, who just arrived. I'll start with a history of this century. When we were celebrating millennium, everybody was happy. Everybody was joyful, very motivating. We were expecting new era, modern era. We were ready to create millennium goals, which were then changed into sustainable development goals. We were willing and motivated to make peace in the whole planet, to eradicate the poverty, to bring each person adequate food and drinking water, to teach our children and reduce the illiteracy rate to 0. We were very motivated to do that. And maybe the world of that time gave us this motivation a ground. But we look at today's world, it's absolutely different. It's selfish, it's fragmented. We have a lot of military conflicts around, and the whole globe is divided in 2 parts. The part which respects some order, international order, treaties, and organizations, and with the other part who don't care about international law, international treaties, and organizations, which are led only by national interests. And these countries have put their national interests above the interests of the whole globe. I was thinking why it happened. Why it happened? Because there should be some reason why it happened. And then I recognized one trend. We have powerful, economically powerful countries. Bigger, smaller, even superpowers. And they have some influence on the processes in the globe, economic influence. So it was yesterday, and so it would be also tomorrow. Economy drives the globe. But there are some countries who are not economically powerful, but who want to be influential in foreign global affairs. So, and these countries compensate the economic weakness with the development of military might. And they force the rest of the world to respect this military might. And their ambitions are much higher than they can afford. That means they pay a lot of money for the foreign activities, military activities abroad, but the cost for that is the living standards of their own people. And there are at least three examples: North Korea, Iran, and Russia. And they have the illusion that by increasing the military might, one day they will become economically powerful states. But this is illusion. This is an illusion because it can't happen. It has never happened. It has always failed in the history. So, but if we look at the figures, economic figures of the last 7-8 years, we see that we have slowed down of the economic development. The growth in economy over the globe is slowed down, not as we expected. We see the slowdown of the growth of investments, and we see the slowdown of productivity. And we don't speak too much about these things. But it was mentioned this morning that rich people from the poor countries invest in the rich countries. And that's true. But the rich countries hesitate to invest in poor countries right now because of uncertainty. Not only the economic and financial crisis and the slowdown because of very pragmatic reasons, there is also a very good reason. It's uncertainty. Uncertainty in security, uncertainty in politics, and uncertainty even in policies implemented by the global players. I would like to emphasize at least 3 reasons for uncertainty. The first one is war or military conflict. And the history shows that if 2 parties are in war and one wins and the other loses, still they look afterwards, both sides have lost the war because of devastating destruction of infrastructure, because of loss of people, and because of these casualties, which create hate, which create the necessity for reconstruction, which is very costful. But today, the powers have designed very specific type of war, proxy war. That means that devastating destruction and the war casualties are not on their territories. It's somewhere else. And some people make money on selling arms, and some people will make money in the reconstruction building. But it is not happening on their own soil. It's not happening with their own people except military. And I distinguish 3 types of proxy wars today. The one type is when you have one external player, and this is a case of Russian-Ukrainian war. Why it's proxy? Because Russia denies that there's Russian military and Russian arms on the Ukrainian ground. But it's so. This is the easiest case because if the country who performs a proxy war decides to finish this war, it's easily possible because if you have just one player, you don't need compromises, you don't need negotiations. The second type is when 2 parties fight in the third country. And this example may be the Yemen, when you have Iranians and Saudis fighting or supporting the fighters there. And this conflict is much more difficult to solve because nobody is going to give up. The third type of proxy war is multiple actor, and that's what we see in Syria. You have US there, you have Russians there, you have Turks there, you have Iranians there, and you have Saudis there. You see, and we don't see any de-escalation of this conflict. What we see that this is escalation time by time. Nevertheless, you know, the level of destruction is there so devastating, it will need at least 10, 20 years to rebuild this country. And the interests of all the players from outside are different. And maybe it's easier to find solutions in the southern part, but in the northern part, nobody knows when it is finished. Because there is only one optimistic note. All the wars are started by politicians, kings or presidents or whatever, even governments, but all military conflicts are ended by people. And the only thing we can rely on is the people of this region. And there's one exception, by the way. Jordan, 50 years of peaceful, sustainable, stable development. Jordan has wars around. Iraq, Palestine, Syria, In Egypt, you have some military coups. But Jordan has stayed stable and peaceful because the leadership of this country, definitely to say the King Abdullah and the whole family of ruling family, is for peace. And they have accumulated 1.3 million refugees. I repeat it once more, 1.3 million refugees. That means they had to spend money on teaching them, on healthcare, and only 20% on the camps. And the biggest problem nobody maybe can imagine is a lack of drinking water. But the goal of the leadership to keep the peace works. So, if we look at the international organizations, United Nations, including the Security Council, has not prevented any war in this century. It has not ended any war in this century. The only positive thing is that there is no war between the permanent member states of Security Council. Maybe this is enough. The other thing, that's the other reason which creates uncertainty, is fake news. Fake news is a reality. And before I start explaining the danger of the fake news, I will start with some simple definitions. We many times say we live in an information age. We are information societies. We are all interconnected by very fast speed information routes all over the world, globally. And of course, the advanced part of the globe, much more. But what's information nowadays, which circulates with a very high speed in between us? Information is knowledge without experience. And I repeat it once more. That what circulates on all the internet very often is information which are not tested, which are not proved by experience. But we have to face it because it's so quick and people don't have time to check out. They just put like or share and this fake information goes all around the world. If an individual creates fake news, it's not too much problem because it creates conflicts between some individuals, and diversity of these fake news is so huge on a large scale that it has some impact, but it's not a concentrated impact on our lives. The problem comes when the leader of the state, a powerful state, creates fake news. Because in individual case, we sometimes are very critical about what we read. But if a leader of a powerful state creates fake news, we trust, or at least we believe, or at least we take it very seriously. And it creates a big, big problem because the result of that is a loss of trust and confidence. And if we look at the role of trust and confidence in our lives, no one business success is not based on trust and confidence. No peace and security in the world is not based on trust and confidence. They're very important things. And how can we get back? We can get back only if the part of the globe which respect the international law, which respect the human rights, which respect the international treaties and organizations, keep on going doing that. Sticking to the principles, sticking to the values, standing for them, and not shattering at all. But if we look two, let's say, most visible examples of leaders who create fake news, that's President Trump and President Putin. It's a big difference. Because in America, United States of America, Trump is surrounded by very well-established democratic institutions, which I would not say control, but keep a supervision of all these fake news and react very quickly. In Russia's case, or President Putin's case, they go on because they don't have the experience of strong civil society, of strong democratic institutions. And it makes the danger from Russia much more dangerous than from America. The third thing is populism. Populism, what's a populism? It's the easiest way to attract attention. It's the easiest way to be popular. It's a good tool for opposition politicians, but it's not so good tool for position politicians. When you are in a government, if you keep on being populist, you could not deliver the needs which are needed by the population. You can't. You can be loud as a populist, but you have to deliver something to the society. You can't do it by just declarations. You need something real, measurable, which is appreciated by the society. At the same time, I'm on opposition to those who say, this is very bad, no populism at all. No, we need a little bit of populism as a healthy thing, as a little bit of poison that should keep us all awake, that we are smarter, there is something which is popular but non-deliverable. And the same thing is about the nationalism. The nationalism will be present, as like we talked about corruption a few minutes ago. It will be forever. Because you cannot, destroy person's identity, ethnic identity, cultural identity, or religious identity. You can't destroy it because it's inherited from their parents. And you can't change it. The person himself can change it. But from outside, you can't do that. Should we be afraid of populism and nationalism in a democratic society? I emphasize again, in a democratic society. No, because this is always a minority. This is always minority, but this is an opinion of a group of people living in democratic society. And in mid-90s, when Latvia was a transition state, everybody from the West came to us to teach us how to build democracy. We were eager to do that, but when we said, this is bad guy, this is good guy, we have to eliminate the bad guy and bring in the good guy, and the Westerners told us, no, this bad guy is elected by people in a democratic way. He represents an opinion, a definite group. You have to listen to him. You must not agree with him, but you must find out how to tackle his problem, because he comes with a problem. Today we see reverse situation. The western part of Europe are very anxious about these bad guys should be eliminated. These nationalists should be eliminated. And now we the Eastern Europeans, I'm not talking about Poland and Hungary, I'm talking about the Baltic states and Sweden and Scandinavia. We had to tell them, cool down, these people represent definite, maybe wrong opinions, but we should respect because there is some reasons behind that. And we as a democratic society need to tackle these problems which created this nationalism or populism. So we have to keep very firmly to the basic principles of democracy and to the values. And not just say values, we have to nominate them. That's freedom of speech, freedom of gathering, democracy, that means, and rule of law. And we should stick to that 100%. Every time when we start talking about the democracy has failed, we really do bad to the democracy itself. And always we say we respect all opinions and we are not afraid to discuss these topics with these people who are a part of democratic society. The democracy becomes stronger and stronger. Because these processes show that the countries were not managed in a perfect way. These countries could not, let's say the government and the leadership of these countries could not adapt to the new situations provided by the processes we can't stop. It's the development of technologies, globalization of the world's economy, and migration of people. We can't stop it. Let's not waste time on that. Let's waste time on adapting, how we can adapt our societies to the definite processes. Because you can build, Trump can build a 20 meters high fence. The Mexicans will come by sea. They will find out because the motivation, there's a motivation behind these people. And the people, you know, from Middle East will come to Europe. And this is what you can't stop. So better to put all your efforts how to integrate these people, how to help these people, because it's not so easy. Jordan, Turkey was the easiest part. Europe, very difficult. And even in my country, when the number of refugees are very small, but sometimes you have to listen to the small numbers. We could take absolute care of them. And they basically left for Germany. Because they were motivated to go to Germany on the idea of quotas or distribution or solidarity was just on paper. You can't, you know, resist the forces which are based on people's motivation. But the politicians should need a future vision. And they have to talk to the people. That's what they don't do. And the European Union is not an exception. Nevertheless, the European Union is best ever model of political and economic and multicultural coexistence. It is the best model. And every time when some of the European leaders, you know, say, we are in trouble, it means you have to tackle the problem. The European Union could split apart. What are your arguments? No one. There's no argument behind these declarations. And they are stupid declarations if they are made by the leadership. I am a very, very, very advocate of European Union synchronization. I'll tell you what's that. Today we have multiple speed Europe a la carte. Every country takes something what they like and don't take what they don't like. I think this is over. This time is over. At first, if you want a strong euro and strong European economy, every country should and must join the euro currency. And euro currency must be a currency for all European countries. If you like it or not, that's the only future, to be strong. The second is free movement inside Schengen. You know what Schengen is really free movement. And we still have countries like Romania and Bulgaria who are not in. And always when I travel to Bucharest, I hate the long distance I have to make in Vienna airport just because they are not in. And when I go to Sweden, or Poland, I hate to go to the bank office to change the currency and recalculate all the time. Is it easy or not? It is, because we joined Euro a few years ago, and transition period, because we took all the experiences of the other countries, was about 3 months. No inflation, no rise of the prices. People get used to it very quickly. So I don't know why somebody thinks that this is something that is against their sovereignty. Yes, we had the best design of banknotes, very nice banknotes. We were so unhappy to just say one day that we're not going to use them anymore. Instead of that, we got the €2 coin with a symbol of Latvian currency on it, and that's forever. So you have to find some ways how to motivate the people. The third is enlargement. And that was a mistake by European Union to say, we are not going to enlarge next 5 years. Stupid. Because it's easy to say, it's populism, by the way. Because I can't imagine that Europe will say to any country who has fulfilled the requirements, the key commentaire. Whatever country, in Balkans, in Eastern Europe, I can't imagine that somebody will say no. But all these countries must focus on the homework to bring up their country to these standards of Europe. And a couple of weeks ago, I met President Poroshenko of Ukraine. And we had a conversation about more than an hour and a half. What impressed me more, because I travel there every year just to see what is a change. Not what is a change in media, but what is a change in real life. What people on the streets talk, what a taxi driver talks to me. I'd say, what are the environment in a hotel, or in a cafe. And he said, very important message to my mind. I started and now very strongly believe in European values and principles. And that means not only the civil society of Ukraine, but the president, if he believes Europe, it will not be easy, it will not be quick, but someday they will become a member state. So should we open to everybody, including Balkans, Georgia, and Ukraine, Moldova? I would say 100%. This will make Europe stronger. And it's stupid to talk about enlargement fatigue or something like that. If you are, let's say, weak, that's your problem. But Europe must be strong and not show the weaknesses, even if sometimes Europe becomes lazy. The next point is military security. And again, there are a lot of arguments for not having Finland and Sweden in NATO, but the times have changed. The only problem we have to convince the people of these countries, and we need arguments. The arguments are very simple ones. Article 5. Everybody likes Article 5 of NATO in my country. Everybody thinks this article will save us from the war, from the attack from Russia. You see, yes, but it will save us only in a case of attack. But much important is to prevent the war. The deterrence policy is much more important than just Article 5. We are united in a military organization. Because even in one day, my country could be destroyed totally. And then Article 5 will just bring us back to the status that we have to rebuild our country. I would not like to do that. I would like to avoid the war. And then the deterrence policy is the most effective tool. But it is effective when we are all united on the borderline. Because cooperation is good somewhere else, in a proxy situation, like Afghanistan was a case in the history. But you need to be under one command chain. You have to be under one planning, and then you show the strengths, which is an effective tool for deterrence policy. And this is a piece what we get instead of that. Of course, it's not very important from Austria. It's in the middle of NATO and middle of Europe. We can leave them alone. But basically on the borderline, we should be very strong and tough. Let's finish up with some philosophy. Do you really understand the importance of perception and the importance of facts? What's the difference? In which cases we use facts for arguments, in which cases we use perception as an argument. There is a big difference. Facts are good for analysis, but they are not good for perception management, for emotional management. Because, let's see, two things. War is a fact. Casualties, artillery, air force, destruction, that's a fact. Security is a perception. You can't define this as a fact. That means that perception might be from the pessimistic view and might be from the optimistic view in the same circumstances. And that's where our politicians of today must learn how to manage perception or perception management, emotion management. Yeah? Uncertainty, which I started to talk about in the beginning, is a perception. And what to do with that? If you have optimistic perception, it creates optimistic expectations, and the investments will come. If you have pessimistic perception in the same circumstances, you'll get negative expectations, and investments will not come. And I end up with the joke. You know the joke about the glass, about this glass, about this. I drink a little bit. Still, not half. We all know this joke. Pessimist says it's a half empty. And optimist says it's half full. It's static. But when you look from the dynamic point, pessimist says it may evaporate, the water may evaporate, and the glass will be empty. The optimist will say, the rain may come, and that will fill the glass. And that's very important to be with an optimistic approach. But only a week ago, I heard this joke once again. And do you know who is the third person who comes? You know? An engineer. And he says, this glass is right twice too big as necessary. And that's a fact. You see? These two first were the perceptions. This is a fact. You see, I really try to attract your attention. I'm a physician, and I know that most of the diseases come from here. And as a politician, I will say you, the most of troubles we create ourselves, and they come from here. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, Mr. Zatlers, thank you for your speech. Now it's the time for questions. Any questions, please? Please.
Oh, I can tell you about one thing what I forgot. Usually people say, okay, you have to unite the Europe. Brexit is the opposite. And this is a real example. Gordon Brown was telling about Adam Smith and the other stories about Einstein. I'll tell you the story about Gordon Brown. We were both in Lisbon signing the Lisbon Treaty. Gordon Brown signed it 4 hours later in a special ceremony because he had a parliamentary questionnaire that morning in British Parliament. So what I want to say, Great Britain was the last to join Lisbon Treaty, and Great Britain is the first to leave. At the same time, why? Very simple. One of the rules of the rules, stupid questions, stupid answers. If a politician asks stupid question to his nation, he gets a very stupid answer. But what is good in this case, Great Britain has a great tradition of democracy. They're doing everything, to fulfill the popular vote. The end point, when people ask me what will be the end point, I will say that Great Britain will stay as close to EU as possible.
Go ahead with the question, please.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation. My name is Ramzi. I come from Jordan, and I would like to start by thanking you for your speech and for sharing with us the information. My question, I would like to highlight when you talked about democracy and when you said the importance and the role of democracy in the world. And as a physician, I'm sure you know that for every illness you have a different treatment. And for me, I see countries as having different illnesses and different problems. So my question is, from your experience, what do you think, how do you think many people believe that democracy is the answer to all the problems? And unfortunately, we've seen democracies fail. We can take the example of Lebanon, Syria, in Europe, you can take Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Africa, you can take many cases, many countries. So why do we always say democracy is the answer when in many cases it's not? Thank you.
Yeah. You say democracy is a value. What's a common feature of all values? You can't buy it, you can't sell it, you can get it like a gift. The same is with this value, which is called democracy. You cannot export, you cannot transform. It should be from the inside of definite society, from a definite in a definite country, and each country will have different ways to that, to implementation of these principles and values, because you have to understand, constitutions are very different in different countries. But the principles and the values are the same. And I'll give you one more thing, The 4 most important values in the mankind. First is the life itself. Because you are not alive, you don't know what's happening here. The second is health. So you can execute your life in the best ever way. The third one is love. Family, kids. And the fourth one is you need a job to feed the family. And if you ask the people all around the world in the different countries, with different cultures, with different backgrounds of democratic experience, all people will agree on these 4 values. So let's start with that. At the same time, we are killing each other. It means we don't respect the value which is most important. And in one audience, a person asked me, and what is about the human life? I said, the God. You got it?
Yes. Any other question?
I have a question about Georgia, actually, about West and Russia. Do you think that West has made a mistake in early 2000s when treating Russia differently, especially, and not reacting on time for example, 2008 Russian invasion in Georgia? And do you think all these measures are a bit late right now? And what else should be done to manage the situation with Russia?
Has let's say Western Europe or West made a mistake? Yes, 2008, Bucharest. Yeah. Not to tease Russia, not to tease Putin, was absolute failure. Now nobody is trying not to tease. Everybody is pretty tough with Russia. And we have much better result than with not teased policy. If in Bucharest, Georgia and Ukraine, despite in what, let's say, level their armed forces and societies were at that time, got the map, it was a signal. And if President Bush would not say that, he had to say no in Sochi after the meeting, but he just kept silent. There would not be a war in Georgia. And let's remember that you have to be active and understand. I come from the Baltic region, you know, and usually Europe has a perception the Balts are Russophobes. Yeah? I'm sorry, Russia is our neighbor. But today they say, we didn't listen to you. Everything you said about that, about Russia, Russia's behavior, foreign policies, goals, was right. And I hope it's much easier today speak about the policies towards Russia than it was 10 years ago. At the same time, I would like to finish on a positive note. We had to leave Russia with its own problems alone. Let's not interfere in their internal affairs. But if Russia does something wrong outside, we have to act very, very actively, very straightforward. Because someday Russia will change, but it will change from inside. We are waiting it.
For 1 century already.
I don't know, maybe even more.
Next question. No, please.
Thank you for your talk. You were talking about managing perceptions and that politicians need to learn to manage. And I think over the last century, and even in this century, we've seen a lot of politicians being very good at manipulating perceptions. Call it propaganda or fake news, and I think a lot of people are. Another perception is that they're very afraid of this happening again, that they can't trust what people are telling them, and this will. How would you say? How can we manage the management of perception in that way?
Better understanding of human being. That was said in this room already today. We have to understand that arrogance is the biggest enemy of politicians.
Okay. May I close the discussion or the last question, please?
Thank you.
Last one.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to borrow a little from your experience as a head of the state, because I work with some government in Africa, and I know some pressure head of state which nobody used to suffer. You talked about the opposition versus the government delivery. Always the opposition, they have a mouth to speak a lot, but the government need to have a hand to do a lot. But balance is a really challenge to the head of the state between delivering and taking the pressure from the opposition and be able to sustain their leadership in the next election. This cycle normally is a really challenge to some of. How did you manage?
You see, politicians change, and they must change. Because the situation around in the society, in the world, is changing all the time. You may be the most smart man in the world, but you get tired, you get boring, and you don't see the changes happening around. And therefore, the politicians must change. They must change, and they change. The societies, what you said, we were asking about democracies. In democratic societies, people are not afraid of change of leadership. And I remember many times ago when I was practicing as a physician, I had a course on orthopedic surgery, and there was a person from Arab world, and he was very angry about me because it was a time of Saddam Hussein. And he said to me, Bush is the same kind of dictator than Saddam Hussein. And my answer was yes. He was surprised because he was very aggressive. He looked at me with an interest. I said, yes, only for 4 or 8 years. And that's the difference.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Zatlers. We must shake a hand with you. Shake a hand.